Welcome to Beyond Business Barriers, powered by insights, driven by strategy, and yes, assisted by AI. I'm your host, Roy MacEwen, and today's episode is part of a special series where we sit down with industry leaders to dig into what's working, what's not, and what the future holds. I am excited to have Samantha joining me today. Samantha, glad to have you here. Let's kick things off with a quick intro. Can you tell us who you are and where our listeners can find you online?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for having me. It's not every day people let me just talk about myself and what I do. So it's a fun opportunity to be able to do that. I appreciate you asking, Roy. My name is Samantha Jones. I am now the owner of Samantha Jones Consulting. I have been in the supply chain and logistics industry for about 7 years now. And I spent most of that time in some type of sales or revenue strategy role. And in towards the end of 2023, I went out on my own and started a consulting company. And so now I focus on helping other companies to grow through revenue and brand strategies. I have
Perfect.
a website that tells a little bit more about all of my services in detail. So it's www.connectsjc.com. But I am a very active member of the LinkedIn community, and that's where I really like to network and connect with people. So you can find me on LinkedIn as well at Samantha Jones.
Perfect. Well, for our listeners, here's how the podcast will go today. We'll start with a little more of your background and some shifts you're seeing in your industry. Then we'll dig into the current priorities and challenges. And finally, we'll look ahead and where things are going and how you're preparing for what's next and what the future holds. So we'll start at the top. We'll go a little deeper now with your role in the company and how does it connect to the bigger vision you're working towards?
Yeah. So Samantha Jones Consulting was created after I spent a year co-founding and scaling a logistics brokerage from the ground up. So I was working for as the vice president of revenue for a e-commerce home delivery based like LTL shipping company. And so that obviously was very popular during the pandemic. And so that company had kind of sprouted up just before when everyone needed their patio furniture and their couches and their flat screen TVs delivered during the pandemic because we weren't going anywhere. So that company grew to around $30 million pretty quickly. And then I joined them in 2022 and I was the vice president of revenue. And so I spent a few months on that side, just helping with the managed transportation and revenue strategies. And then the CEO and owner was like, hey, I think that we could expand and grow a separate business segment, start a separate business unit. Would you lead that for me? And so I co-founded a separate business unit. And the for folks who might not be too familiar with transportation, 2022 and 2023 and all of 2024 were very what we call weak markets. So our industry has just been very suppressed. We still are here into 2025. Actually, it hasn't changed. We thought it would by now, and it hasn't. And so it's been a very competitive, very difficult business environment for companies to grow in. But we were the crazy people who started a business unit. And so I led that business to a little over $25 million in annualized run rate in about 9 months in 2023 and decided that was like the most stressful, but the most fun thing that I had ever done. It's just being able to really be a part of a business scaling and going through all of the challenges and figuring out where do you fit in a market? How do you position yourselves? Who do you serve? What do you do? Like, what is your purpose? And we really had to figure all that out as we went and then lean into it and tell our story and get people to buy from us as a new provider in a very competitive marketplace. And so as I was, the CEO decided to merge some companies and things moved around. And I decided I really wanted to do that again. And so I stepped out and I started Samantha Jones Consulting because I didn't just want to do that with one other company as a full-time employee. I wanted to help a lot of companies figure out the structure around how to accomplish new growth. And so that's what I do now. My day to day looks a lot like meeting with senior leadership of other companies. And we are planning and navigating their current market environments while figuring out what growth looks like for them. And so I really have the privilege, but the challenge of meeting companies where they're at, learning more about them, figuring out their resources, what their budgets are, and then doing as much as we possibly can to grow with what we have available to us. And so day to days, I mean, I do a lot of mornings are my calm time. I do a lot of my own kind of strategy thinking and my more anything that needs more creativity poured into it. I'm a morning person. I'm up early, and so anywhere between 3:30 and 8 a.m. I'm usually working on kind of creative ideas and concepts. And then I have meetings from usually 10 to 4 p.m. with my various clients, and we're covering all sorts of things and training their sales teams and little bit more mixed in. I also manage some, I don't have full-time employees, but I have multiple 1099 contractors who do various things for my clients. And I have to manage those contractors as well to make sure that we're getting our brand designs completed, our websites completed, any sales materials and PDFs created that we need done, things like that. So keeping on top of them. But that's kind of a day in the life and the overall gist of what I do.
So if I was to shadow you for a day, that's what our listeners would see. And now routinely, I know you keep track of you're a numbers person, and you keep track of issues that come up. What do you see shifting in the industry lately that's really caught your attention?
Yeah. So I think that I'm in B2B services. So that's the best way to put this if we have listeners listening from, not necessarily logistics and transportation, but I would be speaking more to the B2B services space. And so I always remind my clients that, especially at this point, um, we're selling ourselves. We are selling trust and relationships and confidence. And we don't have a physical product. It's not easy to evaluate it and check the boxes and does it meet my requirements, and it's a one-time purchase, and can I return it if I don't like it? Like, this is a service relationship. Specifically in my industry, a lot of these partnerships are services that result in 250,000 all the way up to like $10 million contracts being signed. And so there is a lot of trust that has to be there. And so I would say two things that are trending right now that almost are at odds with each other. One is our world moved to this idea of like self-serve, click and buy, don't interact with real people in our personal lives, right? And so that almost worked against businesses who are trying to not be in that transactional feel when we're talking about services. And we saw somewhat of a shift towards that where people were more comfortable with online relationships or let me just like send over your materials, I'll look at stuff and I'll see if it works. But then AI came on the scene, and since I really position in the brand and sales space, I have to say that the more we push towards automation, the more we push towards less real time, like real FaceTime, people to people interactions in this space, the more our buyers are actually starting to like, even if it's inadvertently, crave and appreciate authenticity and real people. And so we are seeing kind of this trend now almost AI hasn't even reached its pinnacle yet. I'm convinced of that too. It's still ramping up in momentum, but we're already reaching this point where we're seeing buyers start to want people to differentiate from the noise that they're seeing every day. So they're seeing AI generated LinkedIn content, they're seeing AI generated ads, they're seeing AI generated emails, and they're getting phone calls with pre-recorded voicemails getting dropped in when they don't answer. And so the more that we're seeing this, the more we can also find opportunities, what we work with our clients to do to differentiate from all of that noise. So relationships are still king, in my opinion. I know that's not really a new trend, but the trend would have been the shift towards the transactional feel, the shift towards the AI. And maybe that had a brief time and place when everything was so crazy during the pandemic and people were frantically buying and money became no issue for a couple years there. And there was all of this going on. But now we're fatigued. We're fatigued by the AI. We're fatigued by the lack of relationships. And I think we're trending back towards focus on relationships.
Now, would you say it's a transitional phase with AI right now? And it's a tool it's all a
It's
tool,
a tool.
and it's people learning how to use those tools.
Yeah.
I think that's what's going on right now,
Yeah.
because like you said, it hasn't even come close to reaching its pinnacle yet. It's still growing, And the more inept people get to how it works and what they're supposed to use it for, I think that's a big thing. Um, Now, with everything else that's going on, and what we you talked about so far thus far, what's one operational bottleneck that keeps coming up with every client? What's something that comes up
Mm.
there?
So I work predominantly I've had customers as small as like $2 million. And I know that might not sound small in other industries, but it is small in like freight and
Oh yeah,
transportation,
absolutely.
up to some that are 100, $150 million is kind of more the range I fit in. Typically, and that's because a lot of companies that are larger than that have their own in-house training teams. They have a lot of depth and layers to their sales organization. So their sales managers, their sales VPs. And when you have these smaller businesses, there's not as much depth in those layers and there's not an in-house training team. And so that's kind of where my services fit in, is with companies who want to grow, want to expand, but they don't have sales training resources and they don't even really have like a full-time sales manager, if you will. Often the sales manager is like a legacy seller with the largest book of business that he has to also keep up with. So that's kind of where I come in to help um, train and improve sales and marketing teams, and then also kind of be like a fractional chief revenue officer or even sales manager. So something that I have seen consistently is the struggle for small to medium-sized businesses to hire sales talent. And the reason is they can't really afford to train um, new green talent. So they know that realistically speaking, if I hire someone, I can't dedicate any one person's time to sitting with this person for 8 to 12 weeks to really get them comfortable with the industry, comfortable with our business, to understand what we do. And a lot of businesses in my space as well are now remote based. So a lot of their teams are remote, especially on the sales side. And that makes it even harder because it's hard to throw them in to shadow someone because you're hiring remotely. You can't even like have them sit with the rest of the sales team in an office. Um, and so they have a lot of challenges on that front. And so often what happens is they get kind of, I'll say, suckered into paying 100 to 150K salary base for someone with experience or a book of business. And that rarely materializes into a beneficial hire for the company. And oftentimes they're burning through cash, hiring and firing, and realizing, a year or two later that it was a mistake. And
Yeah,
so
turnover can really
turnover in
kill.
sales and just
Yeah.
hiring in general is one of the biggest challenges that these companies face. And then I have a very firm opinion that over 90% of people in sales are not good at sales. And we're misclassifying salespeople all the time. That's another trend that I see is we say, this is Rob, he's in sales. I'm like, no, Rob is a really good account manager. That's fantastic. Rob does not bring in new business. Rob takes care of business. So Rob used to be really good at selling 10 years ago, and now Rob is comfortable and checked out. There's all different scenarios that we see in sales, but that's one of the first things that I get tasked with identifying when I come into a company is, if you want to grow, why aren't you growing now? If you have salespeople, why are they not producing? And sometimes there's so many reasons. And that's what I try to identify. And then we work past those. But oftentimes it's that you don't actually have salespeople. You have account managers and operators and retired salespeople. Um, and so those are two very common trends.
Now, well, to help us roll forward a bit here, you look at the numbers. So, what metrics or indicators are you tracking most closely right now for the future, and what's getting the spotlight?
Yeah, I would say, within sales specifically, within a company who's telling me they want to grow, I'm looking at year over year percent growth of the business. A business should grow every year. And if you don't, okay, that was a tough year, but you better have like maybe you made investments in something. And so the balance sheet got a little wonky. Maybe you lost a really big contract. And even though you brought on 10 more, it didn't fully offset. But like the goal of a business should be to grow year over year if you're telling me you want to grow. I have met plenty of organizations who are $25 million and they have no desire to ever hit 50. They're 50 and they have no desire to ever hit 60. So they're comfortable, they're family owned, they're a small business, whatever the case is, and that's where they want to stay. That is great. That is like I am like props to these people for knowing exactly where they want to fit and where they want to sit. That's good. Companies who tell me they want to grow, but then we look back in the last 5 or even 10 years, we cannot see an upward linear trajectory on that graph of growth. Like that's a problem. So I am looking at year over year percent growth. We take that down to sellers, right? Because sales, account management generally should be most responsible for providing new revenue.
Yeah,
And then
it's
we're
very
looking.
common. Yeah, it's you were talking. People get in that buffer zone, that comfort
Mhm.
zone, and well, why change if it's not broken? Yeah, but if you don't change something, it's especially for growth because when it comes down to it, every company needs to have growth. I mean, your
Yeah.
company needs to have growth, and I know your company has grown. And what do you attribute to that? Like, is it the want or is it the skill set with the want?
Both.
Yeah,
Yeah, so that's the thing that I would, I talk to people about too. It's like, one, we have to identify that we have set a goal for growth. What is the goal for growth? And make sure it's like realistic. Like, don't say, I want to grow $5 million this year in a brand new business segment. Like, well, is that the best way to grow your business right now? Or should we be in a very, competitive space? Should we be leaning into your core competency and pushing for $8 million of growth in that space first? Um, but overall, right now, if we're looking at growth, we need to take it back to the sellers. We need to take it back to the account managers, and we need to make sure. Oftentimes, they don't even have clear goals. They don't even know what are your quarterly, what are your annual goals. Are they being measured? Are they being held to a standard for growth? Are they being required to bring in net new business or just maintain an existing book? And so that can, that gets a little tricky. That's not less fun part of my job is sometimes looking at commission structures or compensation or like if we're actually meeting goals, are we doing our job? Are we need to be reclassified into a new position? But oftentimes like it's necessary if a company's been stagnant in their growth, we have to make some, a little bit uncomfy decisions. And I think that that's the other way a consultant is really helpful is that it's paralysis. I've seen a lot of business leaders who personally handpicked their employees. Like they have a team of 20 and they're like, I like each of these people. I picked them for a reason. And maybe they did really great for a while and in sales, maybe they did so great and they built up a book of business, but they haven't brought on a new customer or really top line revenue increased in 3 years. And there's just still sitting there like, we just need to pump them up. We need to re-energize them for sales. And I'm like, a real seller, a real hunter is never done. So like at some point we have to just start, it's good for a consultant to be able to be that little push, that little nudge that these leaders need to hear the things that they probably already know. They just haven't wanted to really admit to themselves or have to follow through on.
right, right. That's sometimes that's a hard pill to swallow too.
Yeah. And it doesn't have to be all negative. I would say like I'm a very careful person, when it comes to making decisions. And I think I'd like to say I have a pretty good amount of emotional intelligence. So making sure we're taking into consideration feelings and also just being smart in business. And I've often asked the questions to leaders like, if you lose this person, how much of your business do you lose? And then they give that number, and I say, can you afford to lose that? And if the answer is no, then we make sure we don't lose that person. That
Yeah,
person is
exactly.
fine to continue to do what that person is doing, right? And so we can look at all the different angles, but ultimately we have to decide what we do moving forward and what that strategy looks like to actually achieve that year over year percent growth.
So, with this quarter right now, there are trends and data changing, of course. Uh, is that shaping your strategy today, or are they nudging you to rethink your own growth strategy?
No. Um, I
You
would
have a plan
say,
and you're
yeah.
sticking to it?
So I actually, so one of the things that I consult on is brand, personal brand, company brand. And what I mean by brand is not just like marketing, it's not SEO, it's not Google ads or, paid ad space. It's putting yourself out there and your company out there in a way that people relate to and are attracted to, admire something about your company or organization or what you personally do. And so I had been focused on building a personal brand for a few years prior to going into consulting. And I have never solicited my clients. They've always been inbound, most of them through LinkedIn. I have a form on my website and people
Saw that.
go through that too. And I have a meeting today actually from a filled out form on my website. But I noticed the person who scheduled the meeting through my website is someone that I networked with through LinkedIn like 2 years ago. And now they've moved on. They're in a different role. They have different company and they've circled back. So um, for my growth strategy and something I would highly recommend to any consultant is I've invested heavily in personal brand space. I'm a big conference attendee. I've been a speaker. I'm a podcaster. I author a newsletter with 10,000 subscribers. So I just really invested in like working to have a voice in the industry and sharing information that people find helpful so that you're enhancing your own credibility when you do that, and you're being a contributor, not just an asker, someone who's always asking for somebody else's business, but you're contributing to the space. So that's been my growth strategy. And then, of course, client testimonials are great. Those speak like
Mhm.
louder than anything in consulting. Um, I firmly believe that. Like I have experienced other consultants in my space, like that I hear from my clients, well, we paid a consultant before and this is what the expectation was and this is what happened. And um
So they
I
base that on their
yeah,
one previous experience.
sure,
Yeah.
and that can happen, and I think that what I have heard mostly that, people have negative experiences with consultants is when the consultants say, like, "Here's what you need to do. I gave you the plan. Go implement it and do it." And so one of the big things that I make very clear, whether it's on my website or anytime I talk about my business, is we have we work very closely with leadership when we're creating strategy, but then we have an implementation phase and then we have a continuous improvement phase. So usually my contracts are about 6 months. And the first three is building, design, creation. And then we have implementation. And that's like we help you implement. We hold hands with the sales people, we have weekly meetings. We make sure we're hearing feedback. Like we are making sure it is smoothly implemented. And then if we continue to work longer, we have that continuous improvement phase where we're like actively monitoring results, using the data that we're getting back to tweak and improve tactics, for doing further training for sales teams. So there's a lot of what we do is heavy with leadership and strategy and more high level. But the longer we work with a company, the more we can get in the weeds. And we're doing everything from like cold call training to cold email writing to personal brand training and LinkedIn profile improvements with the actual sales teams that they have. We also get involved in helping to hire new salespeople and training them up, if we work with a company longer. So I think the biggest thing right now that consultants are doing to give all of consultants a bad reputation is, okay, you pay me for my ideas and I hand them over to you and I expect you to go execute. And if you don't get results well, then they blame it on you didn't execute it right. And so I would,
That's accountability there. Like,
yeah,
no, that's not how
yeah.
that works.
I would look for a consultant with energy and passion, because they need to care about what they're doing. Cause then it's, you know, and maybe be a little competitive. Like salespeople make great consultants, I've learned, because I can't stand to see my clients not hit the levels of success that I want to help them hit because I'm very competitive by nature. I'm a salesperson, right? And so if I tell you I'm here to help you and then you're not growing, I start like taking it very personally. And it's not me blaming you. It's like, holy smokes, what do we have to do to figure out
What
how
could
to
I
make
do
this work?
differently here? What could
Yeah,
I
what
do
can I
differently
do?
here? Yeah.
Yeah, to make this better. So that's one thing. And then another thing that I actually think has been a competitive advantage, if you will, for me is that was selling. I was selling the same services that these people are trying to sell in 2023. I didn't do this 20 years ago. I haven't been consulting for 25 years. I've been consulting for almost two. And so right now that's still competitive advantage because the same things you're getting told when you pick up that phone and call or when you get that email back, I was being told those same exact things. I mean, to a T, um, 2 years ago. And I'm also would say another thing in sales, specifically, if anyone's considering a sales consultant, is let them lead by example. I will be the first person to jump on a training call with my clients and make cold calls and pretend to be from your company and like show people how to do it. And so I'm not going to tell you like, oh, this is all the things that the internet says should be done, and I'm going to help you walk through it and then expect you to go execute if I can't execute.
Right.
And that's also just good business advice for any leaders. A lot of leaders ask their teams to do things that I don't know that they could do if they um, were asked and called on to do it. So it's good advice in general for anyone in leadership, I think.
I agree. Now, just out of curiosity, are there any tools, tech, or even habits that have made your work easier in the last year and or more effective?
Video has been great for us, and so we are really leaning into video. There's some really cool tools out there. Vidyard is my preferred. Vidyard was probably one of the first on the market, and because of that, it also got integrated with a lot of the other tools that I like to use. So it's like their kind of preferred go-to video creation tool. And by videos, I mean not like TikTok videos or things that we're uploading on social.
Podcasts.
Yeah, yeah, podcast. Well, that's another one. We can get to that. But videos as in like a sales tool. So you can get on and you can record a video. You can say, "Hi, Roy, my name is Samantha, and I was reaching out to you today." And you could do it via video instead of a cold email or whatever else. Um, so that's been a good one. That's a favorite tool of mine. And they're starting to play a little bit in like videos are trying to make progress with AI too, where you can say you can record a video that's like you say hi watermelon and then it takes your voice and everything and says subs in the person's name instead of watermelon. A little mixed feelings on that, but I'm keeping an eye on how the tool progresses. And then I Zoom Info has been around for a long time. It's popular um, lead database search engine tool for getting like emails, phone numbers, creating lists for sales and marketing. It's very expensive. It is high quality database and there's some great search features in it. I think like the cheapest I've seen clients getting it lately is 12,000 a year. And that's for limited like seats and logins and users. And then I'm a personal fan of a platform called Apollo.io.
Mhm.
It's great. It's what I use. It's what most of my clients use. And if anyone ever has questions about that, I can send you a link for a free trial. Um, and you guys can try it out for like 2 weeks and just play with it
Yeah,
and
you
see
get
what you
2 week
think.
trial. Yeah.
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 And
It's
it's it more than competent for what I need. And one of the things that I love about Apollo is kind of like a HubSpot Zoom Info Lite merged. And so it has sequencing capabilities for your outbound sales efforts. It has a light pipeline that you can manage in there with the deal pipeline and the stages that you can progress and manage through. So Apollo really could, for a smaller company, which I often work with, can be your CRM, your lead database,
Mhm.
and your outbound sales tool. So, and then, like I said, Vidyard integrates into it. Some other intent data tools integrate into it. I also use Front, which is like probably not one that people talk about as much. It's for email. Sits on top of kind of sits on top of your email is a good way to describe it. But basically, I don't log into Gmail. I log into Front, and my whole inbox is in there. But Front is really designed for better team collaboration, and so you can it kind of replaces like a Teams chat or anything like that on top of your um, people go out of email into something else to have like internal threads and communications. And within Front, it has all of it in one. And so you never leave that one place. You can share things really easily. You can add people as collaborators on like real email threads. One of the most simplest ways to describe a simple benefit is like if I get an email from Roy and Matt needs to see it, I don't have to forward it to Matt. I can just type a comment that says at Matt and then he can see it. And not only could he see it, he could actually respond directly to that person now without even having been forwarded or CC'd in it. And so it's really cool for collaboration. And it keeps me organized. It's really good organizational features and flows where things can come in and get prioritized or assigned into a certain folder or inbox flow. So that's great. Um, Tools. I don't want to say a critic, just a little still like hesitant on a lot of the intent data tools that are out there. Some of them are great and a lot of them are really expensive. Like, I think some of the best ones are like $160,000 a year for what we're calling intent, which, if you're not familiar with intent data, it's basically defined as an abnormal amount of search volume around a certain topic by one specific company. So if Samantha Jones Consulting all of a sudden started Googling LMS software, LMS software, LMS software, I'm going to show up in intent data searches for all the LMS providers paying for that intent data.
Mhm.
And so they're going to start soliciting me just because I did some Google searches on it. Um, which, to that point, that's good for them because I would be a buyer of an LMS software. It's something I've been evaluating. And so if I decided to like go that route and they were pitching me, someone's probably going to end up with business. So it's really good for productized verticals, if you will.
Mhm.
It's a little bit more vague for services. And specifically in what we do, like I think you just need to evaluate two things. Do you think your buyers actually Google what you do? in my space, we have like 33,000 people that compete for the same pool of business.
Yeah,
So
exact same
they have
pool.
500 cold emails every day in their inbox. They're not out there Googling, where do I find a freight broker?
Yeah.
So like they're overwhelmed. So they're
I
not
have
Googling.
185 right here today. Yeah.
Yeah. So with those, I mean, no. But I have clients right now who are technology companies actually in supply chain, and they are more of a product. And we could easily say, anyone searching this, I want to know about it. But the problem is right now, both of my companies, when we considered paying for intent data, we went through and I said, realistically speaking, we have an ICP that's been very clearly defined, your ideal client profile. And we have pulled all the data, and you only have 100 companies that should be your top focus right now. Do we really need to know which of the 100 is more interested than the other? Or is it fair to say we can aggressively prospect 100 companies in the same month, every month? So the answer was the latter, and we chose not to go with intent data.
Right.
So I think that intent data, you're going to get a lot of people saying, like, if you're not doing this, you're behind, you're already missing out, you're behind the curve. And it just depends on your product, your service, or your industry, and your ICP. So once you shore up those things, you should be able to make a more educated decision on intent tools because there's a lot out there right now. Um, and then the last just being general AI tools. Like, yes, I'm a fan of ChatGPT or Claude in certain use cases. I'm a writer. It's kind of my thing. It's kind of what I do. So I tend to be pretty picky. So like you said earlier, you have to really be careful right now how you are teaching it. Are you learning it to talk like you? Are you, adjusting the way it spits back out answers each time and asking it to remember your preferences and doing that.
But what I did notice though is I write my own style too. I'm old school in case you didn't realize that. But I do a lot of my own writing and I use it to heighten and intensify and sometimes, get rid of those blocks. And I've been using it solidly for about 6 months now. And now when I say in my tone, in my style, create this, and I really have a hard time differentiating now
Yeah.
that I write that. I mean, my memory's not the greatest, but I can still look at it and say, okay, yeah, it's not quite where I'm at, but it's very close.
I think it really depends what you're using it for. And so when I'm using it to help me like I said, I'm a writer. I'm also a talker, if nobody's been able to tell by now. So I tend to be a little long-winded even when I'm writing. And so for me, that was one thing that helped a lot is I said, "Hey, can you please help me say this more
Condense this.
concisely?" Like, and
Yeah.
they
Oh,
would be
you
like,
say
"Oh,"
concisely, you
and
don't say condense.
every time I would see it, I'd be like, "Huh, wow, I didn't realize I could have said that in so much fewer words." So that's
Yeah.
great. That's a good purpose. And then something that I've seen it struggle more with is I write a newsletter each month, and it's pretty time intensive for me. I spend hours and hours of research and, you know, thought, idea, like putting together my thoughts and ideas around what I'm reading and studying and then formulating it. And so I like write just paragraphs and paragraphs and I go. And then sometimes I'm like, well, like it'd be nice to just paste this in here, let it spit it back and make it sound better. And so I've done that a few times and I just have found that it can't quite effectively capture your ideas is like the best way to put it. Like sometimes it changes words just enough to where that's not what I meant when I was trying to convey this concept. And um that's just because it doesn't really know. It doesn't the internet can't even really tell it what I'm thinking that how I want to say this. And so it struggles more with that and I feel like I've lost my depth and my intensity sometimes doing that. So there's just different ways you have to watch it. And so I actually just decided, hey, you know what? I want people to know that this newsletter is Samantha's thoughts anyway, not AI. And so I don't use AI on my newsletter. I just made that executive decision after a couple attempts to keep it more authentic. And it is what it
No,
is.
absolutely. And the authenticity is there, and that's the thing. And one thing that I'll just add to that is that when we're creating something, we kind of have in the back of our mind what the end result is going to look like,
Hmm.
and it cannot predict or you can't say, okay, here's the beginning and the end, or here's the beginning and the middle. I want you to create the end, and it's not going to happen.
Yeah.
It's not going to do the work for you, and that's what a lot of misconceptions occur, I believe.
Yeah.
All right, it's magic wand time. This is the special time. If you could instantly solve just one major issue in the business just by making it disappear, what would it be?
By making something disappear. I would what about I might have to tweak that a little bit to making something, like, up here. But,
By all means.
or maybe we'll make, like, a misconception disappear. The misconception that we need to hire experienced salespeople to produce revenue faster. Um I am like living, breathing proof every time I walk into a client that that's not true. I came into my first role in sales completely green, fresh out of college, and within a year and a half was promoted to a role that required 10 years of experience because I was outperforming the 200 something peers that I had at the time. Um, it's I want people to start hiring for the right soft skill sets. And then we need more solutions around enabling organizations to take advantage of real sales talent and being confident in their ability to bring in, train, and grow and retain salespeople. Because that's the other challenge is once we bring them in and we
Retention.
make them great, how do we
Retention.
keep them? So there's like two fronts to that, but the best way to retain a good salesperson is to give them a fair compensation structure and get out of their way.
Mhm.
So
Fantastic. That's I couldn't have said that better. Well, I probably wouldn't have. That's why you said it. Well, it's been a great conversation. I really appreciate you coming on today, Samantha. I appreciate how open, thoughtful, honest you've been. Once I
yeah,
finish this series, I'll be pulling together a highlight reel of key takeaways from all our guests, and I'll be sure to send one your way. Have a fantastic day.
awesome. Thank you so much. You too.